Hello everyone, so if anyone saw my last video, you see that I am doing a series where I am teaching some people how to edit and some of the things I have learned along the way. Going into this video, I've had a couple of patrons give me some questions about what to cover in this video exactly. And so in this video, I plan to go over some things that are going to help you even more when it comes to putting a video together, but also what you can do to really amp it up a little bit, really give it that bit of spice. So the first thing I want to go over, because this was a question that a patron had for me, was why is it when I move my clip on the timeline it doesn't connect like your one does? Now that's because of snapping, and you will see this on right here by the timeline. You will see that we have here, here, here. Now sometimes your snapping timeline may not be on for whatever reason. Now this is most likely because you do not have a certain option turned on your timeline, and what this does is it allows you to snap two clips together, and you'll see that on the left here, this little magnet icon called snap in timeline, or if you accidentally press S and accidentally turn it off, that is why that would be not working for you in that case. So you can just press that, and now you will see that when you try and move a clip, you'll have this little black bar right here just letting you know that the videos have touched, and so that just helps you a little bit, just getting those together. One thing that I have an issue with is that sometimes when you are like really zoomed out on a timeline, so like let's say if we were just really zoomed out and we had like a lot of videos, sometimes it will tell you that you'll be right there, but you also have to look at your playhead as well. So if you really want to just have it at the edge, you need to make sure your playhead is not on that video. Another thing I found that may help you a little bit is if you have two clips and you want to get rid of that little gap between them, you can just press delete and it will snap them together immediately, just like that. So one thing that I would like to finish covering is the tools. Last time you may have noticed that I only went over 4, which was the selection, the razor, the rectangle, and the type tool. In this one I want to go over the rest of them just so you know exactly everything that you're working with and you know how to use all the tools at your disposal. So first we have our ripple edit tool, and what this does is it makes it so if we were to take our video and then click and drag it normally to say like, oh, I actually want to end this clip here, you will see that that is just our standard selection tool of us doing that. Now if I am to undo that and use the ripple edit tool instead, you will notice that if I take that away, that will move this to that clip even like closer, so you don't have to do the extra editing of moving everything afterwards. I would recommend using this sometimes because it really does eliminate some of the struggle of trying to move everything along the timeline to the new changes. Now if you had two videos together just like this and you wanted to change the starting point or the ending point of one, now we can go to our ripple edit tool and we can see this rolling edit tool right here, and what this does is allows you to just move one and then the other clip will make up or not make up the change in difference. So let's say if we want more of this video actually, and that's right there, you're gonna see that we have less of this video now, but we have more of this one. I don't know how effective it is exactly, mainly because I don't think it copies over things like audio, as you can see here, that the audio has not gone along with it, so you would probably need to extend that as well. And this actually lets us go into our next tool pretty quickly as well. So this is the slip tool, and because we use our in and out points that I went over last video, I personally do not find myself using this tool at all, just because I am very confident in the in and out points that I have chosen. But let's say that you aren't, and so let's say that we go over this video and we say, oh actually I want more later on. We can hover over it and then scroll by, and then you can see that you have the first frame on the left side is the first frame that is like our new starting point for the video, and then the one on the right is our new ending point. So you will see that rather than having our default like with this, we now have all this extra now because we have moved it over. We have said, oh, I want more, or I want to move this along, this isn't exactly what I wanted. This mainly helps just in case you didn't grab enough of your clip or the right parts, and like let's say if you were slightly off, this just helps you move that along. For me, this tool is very niche, as I said before, just because we do set our in and out points before and then grab what we need. So I feel like knowing how to use this is helpful at least, but using it, I don't see it very much. I want to show a little tip as well when it comes to our razor tool. So let's say if we have all our clips together and we said, hey, I want to do a cut like right here. What you can do is when you click on that razor tool, so you can see that right now I can only hit one of these clips. If I press shift, I can do that for all of them. So now in that moment I've said, we have now cut all that. We've cut that whole section. That goes for audio, that goes for anything in that section, can just be moved over. And that actually helps me go into my next one. Next we have the track selection tool, and I think that this tool is quite the lifesaver, especially if you're editing something and you're like, damn, I really wanted to add something here, but if I move something, my entire timeline is going to be messy and it's like so filled up with footage that it would take forever to do so. Using the track selection tool makes this easier because if you take your cursor, and so I say, if I click here, everything beyond this clip moving to the right side is now selected, so you get to move that along. And if you press shift A, so everything you can see, if I zoom out, everything there is now selected. And so if I press, you press A to go back to normal, and now everything on that far right side is selected. And if you press shift normally and you will only grab the things on a certain track or on a certain layer. So if I say layer 4, I want to grab everything from this point onwards, you'll see that on layer 4 we have grabbed all of that. Personally, I would say that the best thing to use this for is if you just want to move things around, just so you can be like, oh, I wanted to add this part here and there. You may notice that I did that about 4 times in my last video. You can tell because I was whispering into the mic because I filmed it super late. Next we have the hand tool, which I've actually never used before, and I only really learned what this did during the filming of this, in which its main use is when you are so far zoomed in into your project, it allows you to really just navigate around a little bit, which is fine. It's completely fine. The thing is, when you zoom in, you have these points anyway to control it, so I don't know. I can't say how useful this is. And it also, if you hold on to it as well, when you go to the tool, you will see that it also has a zoom tool. Now, this is not what you think. This is not for zooming into the project. No, this is for zooming into the timeline. Which, interesting. But like I said before, because you already have something that already does it, and better, it's not that crazy. And then our last tool on here is the pen tool. Now this is quite similar to the rectangle tool, where it makes its own object on the timeline, and the only difference is that the shape is completely dictated by you. What you can do as well, so if I start again and I press another one, if I hold it, I now have this thing where I can switch and turn and change the angles of this object. So you can see I can move that around. So now you can use these little blue bits here to change just the angle and just all that about it. Personally, I don't see much use for this. I really don't use this a lot, but I guess it's something if you want some flavor to like a speech bubble for whatever reason in your video. So we have our sequence, and let's say we have our video in here, and we want to mess around with it when it comes to motion. Now remember, we went over this when we went into our effect controls, and we went over what it means to move this and how to like animate that. Now we're going to be going into that, but with a little bit more detail. So let's say if I want to zoom in on our video, like I said before, we can use our effect controls to do so. So in this case, because I am using a portrait video, it has made that smaller for me. So, but generally your standard video will say that it is 100. Like if I go back to one of my previous ones, you'll see that that scale is 100. But for this one, we're going to be using this because it is a still video. So since we are zooming in for this example, we don't have to change our current size. So if we press the stopwatch, we will see that when we do so, we get this diamond icon. And this is where the program, or we are telling the program that at this point, this is the size that it wants to be. So since we're doing that and we want to start from the beginning, we can just throw that straight into the first frame. Now, I would say just make your second one by pressing this one right here. So let's say if we want to zoom in to 120, you will see that now that zoom in is just going to be from that point. So between these 2 points, the program is animating this whole bit to make sure that we get to that smoothly. And the good thing is, so if like the closer that these 2 points are, means the quicker that it will be. So if we look again, it's much quicker. And if we were to zoom out, well, if we were to move it away, we can see it already that it's just going to be a much smoother sort of thing to go into. Now you have to be very careful when you are working with keyframes, because let's say for example you have your playhead in the middle here and you say, I'm gonna see what 150 would look like. What will happen now is that as you're going along, it's going to go to 150 here because your playhead was there. And then you still have your previous point, so it's going to start to zoom out to match what we had said, which was the 120 from before. You can go back to keyframes by these little arrows over here. So this one lets you go back, and that lets you go forward. And this makes it so that you are hitting the keyframe exactly. So if since I'm here, if I wanted to get rid of it, we can remove it by pressing that diamond there. But isn't there a little bit of a problem, don't you think? It's a little linear when we look at how this sort of functions. So as you can see, it's just a little bit, it's just one whole, it's just one smooth motion. But what if we wanted to get a smoother animation from our keyframes? So what we can do is we can hover over both of them so that they're both highlighted and right click on them. And sometimes there will be the option of something called temporal interpolation. And if you just hover over that, you will get these options, but sometimes you'll just, if you just click over them, you will get them straight out. Now, if you change to Bezier, that animation will be more like of a ramp up to that ending point. But what if we have more keyframes? Is it fine for me to just Bezier everything? Well, let me tell you this. So, and I've only found that this works with scale. So sometimes, so if we look at this one, and we have our first one, which is 120, because I've copied and pasted these keyframes over to this video. So we have, go straight to 120, but you'll notice that on the scale part, even though this and this are the same at 120, when we go between it, it is creating its own thing, its own movement, and zooming in some more before reaching the 120. And that is because of the Bezier. So like I found the way to do this is to set it there and then have that ending point be linear. And then as soon as you do that, it's still. But then you see as soon as it hits, like it's completely still now from that point onwards. But as you can see, we only have our movement going in. We only have our zoom in going. So if I get rid of these two, because we don't need that anymore, we have our 2 points now. But as you can see, we are only zooming in to the middle of the video. It's very slowly, but we are zooming in. And you could also do this with position. So if we wanted to say, if we start off there and we wanted to end, let's say if we really wanted to look at something, since our zoom in point is 120, you could move it slightly to the right or something. And now you have something, let's say if you had something in the corner that was there, you would then be moving towards that. And let me move it closer just so it's a little bit more noticeable. So you'll see it is now moving and zooming in towards the right. Now do be careful when you zoom in how big your video is, because you do not want these black borders, because it's just kind of ugly to look at. Another thing to do is when you have these Bezier points as well, well these are linear at the moment, if we switch that to Bezier just so it's a lot smoother in its execution. We just have that scroll up. Now you can also do this a little bit better. You can have go here to ease in. So if you have your last points ease in and your first points ease out, what you can do is you can then press this little arrow here and you will see, so because we are on position first, you get to dictate the speed of everything. So you get to, I don't fully understand how to do this perfectly, so I am not going to be 100% at this, but you will see that ramp up in terms of the position is a lot quicker now. And you could do this with all different parts of the video as well. So let's say, for example, if we, can we just pause right there? Jesus. So let's say if we wanted our rotation to be normal and then go to this one and we wanted it to do a full rotation, a full 360, it is going to do that for us. And that also works with opacity. So, you know, if you wanted to control your fade into the video a little bit more, you can also go and do that. We will talk about blend modes a little bit later, but not now. Now this kind of effect is kind of niche, but I'll expand upon this in another video I think, or maybe the next one. But right now I'm going to keep it more on the simpler side. And personally I think this effect comes more into use if you have something like an interview or like a talking head where someone is talking about something. But for the current situation, let's say if we were playing a game and we wanted to show that we were also playing another game on top of that. Is that the, yeah, that's Bomb Rush under that. So let's say if we wanted to show that I was playing Katamari as well. So we have our two videos, and if we go to our opacity section, we have the option of a pen, a square, and a circle or an ellipse. In this case, if we click the ellipse, you will see that we now have this on our timeline or on our preview video. And we can just expand that a little bit, and now you can see if I move this, so if I just go and move this to the side somewhere around top left, you can see the gameplay from Katamari and also the gameplay from our video underneath as well. And that would also change depending on, so it'd be a square if you picked the square. And then if you chose to invert it as well, as you can see, you can no longer see that, but because we moved it up to towards the left side, it is a little bit of a, weird thing to look at the moment. In the last video I went over how the easiest effects to add are the transitions, because you have the ability to just place them at the beginning and the end of a video. But I didn't really show you how you would transition into another video. So we have our two clips here, and they are connected together. As you can see, we have them snapped right next to each other. So let's say if we want to take an effect such as, let's go down to our video transitions, and let's choose something like a wipe, just a standard wipe. So as you can see, as I showed you before, this is the beginning of the Bomb Rush video and this is the ending of the Katamari video, but you have this option to put it in between them. So if we zoom in, you can see now, you can just see that play out automatically. So a standard wipe, just gonna play that now, wipes to Bomb Rush. Now looking at this, you may think this is a little bit basic, and you are correct. There are many things you can do to customize this a little bit, so you may notice that, as we said before, you can extend it to make sure that the wipe takes a longer time to do so. You also have the option of choosing the direction in which the wipe comes about. So right up there, you get to just choose. You can also choose to have a border as well, so if we, and now we have this black border. You can also change the color of the border using this, so that does help a little bit. And each transition will be slightly different when it comes to this. Not all of them may have this sort of thing to work with, but that's if we're using preset transitions. So if we look at that now, but what if we wanted something else entirely? What if we didn't want to do something like that? Well, we have something called adjustment layers, and I like to call this segment, I can create my own transition. Now to a degree, this is very similar to what we just covered. However, an adjustment layer lets you use effects that you may already be acquainted with and lets you create your own transitions. And I do this quite a lot. If anyone has checked my non-editing videos, where you can see in my intro that a lot of my transitions to go to the main video may have special effects on them. The best way to describe what an adjustment layer is that it's like a filter. You get to select a certain point on your timeline, and then you get to decide what everything between that and that is underneath that adjustment layer will then have that effect applied to it. So in this case, if we want to create an adjustment layer, all we need to do is come down here, similar to what we did for our sequence creation in the first video, and then we can just click on adjustment layer. It will ask you about your settings for a project. We just stick to whatever it is because it will always set it to what it is. So let's take our layer and let's place it in between our two videos. So let's cut it down just a little bit, and then we can get that out of here. So as we can see right now, there is nothing because there is no effect on our adjustment layer. So remember, we are using this session to really learn how to sort of animate with things like keyframes. And let's say if we want something like a film reel effect, we would use an effect like offset to do this. And so you will see now, if we set, let's set here, like just before we start to go into the next video. So we'll pinpoint that there. And then if you want to know how, because this movement is just going to change it by how many screens. And in order to know how to do that is to, on your default, you'll see 960 and 540. Half of that is going to be an entire scroll. So like, for example, 540, if you add 270 to 540, it's going to be an entire scroll downwards. Now you can do both at the same time, but for this case I think I'm going to go wherever this would like to take me. So let's go 1350, in which we are, I believe we should be going up, no, down. We are going down. Okay, we will change this to ease in and to ease out, since we aren't going to have any other places, and you'll see that we have that. Now that was a quick transition, but what if we looked at that and said, I feel that's a little bit basic, so what else could we put on top of that? Now what you can do is you can add another adjustment layer. So if we go back, get our adjustment layer, get another one. Now anything, like I said before, so because this is like I said before with the filter, anything underneath is going to have this effect when it's between these parts. So, and because that also works on other adjustment layers, that means we can use this adjustment layer on top to add another effect during that effect and transition. So if I choose something random, what is something random I can pick? We will choose wave warp. So wave warp, if we just cut out this adjustment layer, you'll be able to see what wave warp does generally. So it has like these little waves over here. If I play that, So you can see that there's just a little bit of movement on the wave warp there. So let's see, if I go down here and I can change some of the settings. So you can change things like if you want it to be waves, if you want it to be squares, if you want it to be triangles, all that nice stuff. So because we are scrolling upwards, I would say let's get this to be a little bit more of a stretched portrait sort of thing. And then I'd probably say the more, somewhere in between where it's like you can still tell what it is. And then probably increase the wave speed. So now, because for this one we do not have to add an animation, it's just setting the settings of this distortion, we can now have something like this. And so through two separate effects, we have been able to make our own transitions. Isn't that cool? I really do suggest that if you're going to be messing around with this sort of thing and creating your own transitions, it's best to know and just play with effects. I understand that I have said that sort of 2 videos in a row now that you should play with effects, but that really is how you start to mess around and sort of understand what you can do and what you can't do. I think it's very important for you to understand that what effects that you like to use and what effects you don't like to use, because you may think they look goofy, cheesy, all that stuff. I think it's very important for you to just know what you like. For this next part, I want to take another question. This is one of the questions that someone in my life has asked me, what can I do about this? And so I have a editor friend who wanted me to look over one of her projects because she wanted to see what my thoughts on it were. I thought it was very nice, but I noticed that she had a lot of shaking when it came to her camera and sometimes when she was just had a still shot. Now, as we saw before with this shot that I had, I was very shaky when it came to, well, moving and just keeping it still. So what can we do about this sort of thing? The only option that I have found works, and when I say works, I mean it works to varying degrees. It really determines what you're using it on, because it is not a miracle worker. If anyone remembers from when I was doing the adjustment layers just now, as you may see from this effect here, if we go to distort, or if you just type in warp stabilizer, it's already here on my side. So if you go in and just put that on the footage, you will now see, if I close all of this, or whenever this decides it wants to load on top of it, you will see that you are getting this analyzing in background thing. And what you need to do is you need to wait for this effect to just sort of go through every frame, and that can take some time. So what this essentially does is that it tries to smooth out, but you can also change if it's smooth motion. So for example, if you're like moving a little too much, it will change that movement to be more smooth by trying to move the clip around within the preview. Personally, I prefer no motion, so we would click no motion. And the method that you want to pick is position, scale, and rotation. Another thing that you might try and add when you go into editing is videos from YouTube that have like a green screen, so things like memes and all that. So let me add this, and let's add that into our, let's mute the sound. So you'll notice if we just right click on that and then set to frame size. So yeah, now we have this, and this is the video that we have whenever it decides to show up. But how do we get rid of the green screen exactly? So it's very easy. What you want to do is you want to type in Ultra key in your effects and then apply it. And now you'll see in the effect controls, you have this little segment right here. What you want to do, and sometimes it can be a blue screen, sometimes it's a green screen. You want to just click on that and you'll see that it is now gone. If you want to, sometimes the effect of the Ultra key doesn't always get all the green bits around it. It's done a good job here, but sometimes you want to press aggressive, so you may see it's a little bit more. So like if you relax it, you can see there's a lot more green in the video, but if you go for aggressive, there's a lot less. But you can also change these when it comes to like the matte generation, the cleanup and all that. So if we play it now, I really didn't have any other green screen like video to use. This was like the first one I could come across, so that is how you would do that sort of thing. I also would like to go over some of the things that you can do when you hover over something and then right click it. So you may have noticed that before we talked about unlinking, and this is when you, so as you can see, when the video moves, the audio moves. If you don't want this, or you don't want the audio from something, and let's say that maybe you don't want the audio yet, or you want to use it for something else, or whatever you want to do with it, you press unlink, and now you only have this. You only have the video, you only have the audio. So that is, use it quite a bit, but not very often. It really just depends what you're using it for. Then you have other things, so you have like speed duration, so you can choose how much faster, how much slower you want the video to start playing. So reverse speed is just reversing the video, so you know, you have the thing crashing and then going back, all that. So if you take off reverse, so when you slow things down, and this really depends on the amount of frames that you use to record it, so I'd say 60 frames, and especially like for cameras and for screen recordings, I would say it's gonna take a while, like I'd say maybe about 70%, because you're, let me do this with an actual video, like video game thing. It's pretty smooth. Now when you slow this down to say something like 60, in case you want something to just go down that low, even now it's still pretty smooth actually, and you'll see that this has extended quite far because it has been slowed down. So when you do slow something down, the length does get longer. But let's say if we go for even more, so let's if we go for 35%, sometimes, yeah, you'll see that sometimes the movement will be a little bit choppy, and this will specifically be noticed if you are using cameras to record something like people. So that is where you will see most of this. The best thing you can do is you can use this thing called optical flow, and what that will do is that will try and fill in the frames of that choppiness so that it looks more like 60 frames and all that. And then the last thing I want to add when it comes to these sort of right clicks is add frame hold. So let's say if you see something on like, hey, I would really like to use this for a thumbnail perhaps, or maybe you'd like to use it for just having sort of something pause in the video. So let's say we're moving. So from this point on our playhead, if we right click here and we put add frame hold, so we'll see that the video will keep playing. If we go before that, but as soon as we reach it, freeze framed. And so this is what you can do to sort of do things like thumbnails and all that, or you just want that little freeze frame. This is a good way of doing that. And then if you want to not, like let's say you've chosen the wrong spot and you don't want it to freeze frame here, you can then right click on this and then go to frame hold options, and it says hold on. Now just untick that and then it'll be straight back to how it was before. So that's the end of this video. This was part 1 of how to add flavor, where we looked at more of the visual aspects as to what you can do to improve your video. For the next video, we're going to be looking at audio, what we can do, what effects we can put on it, as well as some techniques we can apply to our own video to make it look a little bit more professional. If you like this kind of content or you want to support me, I have a Patreon, so the link for that will be in the description below. And that's it.